I'm Molly Rosenberg. I'm the Director of the Royal Society of Literature, and I'm very happy to welcome you all. Each panellist tonight has worked in at least two different roles in literature, and our chair for this evening, keeping them on their toes, has worked in, I tried to count it, three, four different capacities in literature. So who could be better to lead them on through? I'll pass over to writer, critic, RSL Fellow, and reader in creative and critical writing at King's College London, Edmund Gordon.
I'm just going to introduce our brilliant and accomplished panel of speakers whose careers span literary landscapes, including live literature, publishing, outreach, and literary journalism, before handing over to my co-host Ariana Nazir, who will lead a discussion with them for between 30-40 minutes, after which I will put questions from you, the audience, to the panel. So the whole event should last around 70 minutes. On the panel, we have Aimée Felone, who is Managing Director of Knights of, which was Children's Publisher of the Year at the 2022 British Book Awards. Aimée founded and runs the multi-award-winning inclusive publisher and is focused on bringing underrepresented voices to the forefront of commercial children's publishing. Sana Goyal is Wasafiri's Editor and Publishing Director. Having worked at the magazine since 2019 as digital editor and deputy editor, she was also formerly publicity manager at Tilted Axis Press and marketing and outreach officer at Poetry Birmingham Literary Journal. Sana has a PhD in literary prizes from SOAS, University of London, and her work has appeared in The Guardian, The Financial Times, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. Elliot Jack is an experienced and accomplished creative producer who's been running Book Slam with award-winning author Patrick Neate since 2005. Book Slam has broken down the barriers between literature and popular culture, featuring hundreds of authors from Andrea Levy to Zadie Smith, along poetry from the likes of PJ Harvey, Kay Tempest, Holly McNeish, and Riz Ahmed. Leah Thorn is a spoken word poet, workshop facilitator, and speaker. She's made award-winning poetry films screened at feminist, eco, and poetry film festivals internationally. Her latest campaign, Address, that's dress, uses message-adorned clothes, poetry, films, and subversive catwalks to raise awareness about fast fashion's devastating contribution to the climate crisis. And hosting the discussion will be Ariana Nazir, who is a second-year student in English here at King's, and whom I will now hand over. Ariana.
Thank you, Edmund. I'll now start the questioning to Aimée. Could you share your journey with us? What inspired you to found the award-winning Knights of? What led you to your current role as managing director, and what it involves in your day-to-day?
I have been in publishing this year 10 years. I started off in small independent publishing houses, and then I was at large children's publishing houses. But it was very early on in my career that I noticed that not only was I often the only Black person in the office, but oftentimes also the only person in editorial or in the creative parts of a company, coupled with the lack of representation in the books themselves. So there was like lack of representation in the offices that I was working in, and also lack in the output, in the authors that we were working with, in the illustrators, in the works and the stories that were being commissioned and highlighted, and the authors that were winning awards and those that were on the charts. I noticed that pretty early on when I was working in traditional publishing, and it was a combination of frustration, but also just, I think I'd got to the point of burnout where I was like, there was nothing that I was able to get through in the houses that I was in. And the only solution for me at that point was to launch an independent publishing house. A brave and a huge step, but not something that I'm diminishing at all, and something that was often really, really scary and uncertain. But I was at the point where, this was back in 2017 as well, but I was at the point where I was just so frustrated by the red tape that you'll often find in larger houses and the excuses, and wanted to be in a position to action the change that I wanted to see. And Knights of was launched with a very simple preface, I think, of publishing underrepresented voices in commercial children's fiction. And I say commercial with intention. I think there's sometimes and quite frequently a pigeonholing that can happen when it comes to publishing underrepresented authors, particularly in the children's space. And so traumatic stories are things that we actively run away from when it comes to our publishing. Our children's books are often joyful, they're not unrealistic. You know, kids go through things as well, and so we have great titles by authors that speak on anxiety and parents splitting up and guardians passing away, but there is often a joy that is central to the narrative. And I think that is really fundamental, that the spaces in which we're publishing are joyful, but also the office that I've been privileged enough to create is also a joyful space as well. Boy, I'm forgetting parts of your question. That's my journey. You asked me about my day-to-day. My day-to-day, gosh, I wish it was the same every day. My day-to-day is very much, I'm the manager for a lot of people in the office. And so I have one-to-ones with members of my staff pretty much every day, a different member of staff. And we're a small team, no more than 5 on our busiest day. But managing and speaking to members of my staff about what's on their to-do list, what projects we have, what books we're working on, where we're at with our authors and illustrators, if we're about to publish a book, often going through the PR plans and the tour plans, but then also when I have my bigger hat on, and I'm less in the day-to-day of what we're doing, it's the strategy for how we become sustainable and how we maintain longevity, because Knights of has always been something for me that isn't just a flash in the pan. I know that the conversation of representation was really popular a couple of years ago and it's perhaps dying out now, but for me we were never born to exist within a moment, where we were born to exist for the future generations. And so something that I often have in my mind is the future and ensuring that we exist beyond today and tomorrow.
Thank you so much. That was really amazing to hear your journey and the changes that you made. If I could go to Sana now, can you share a bit more with us the journey that's led you to your current role as editor and publishing director at Wasafiri, considering your diverse background in literary journalism, publicity, and academia, and also what your role involves day to day?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. In some ways, my perspectives kind of quite similar to what Aimée was talking about as well. So I've been at Wasafiri since 2019 in various roles over the years. But Wasafiri, when I first joined Wasafiri in kind of 2018-19, it was part of a PhD placement run by Chase, which is the Consortium for the Humanities and the Arts Council, Arts Southeast England. And it was Wasafiri's 35th anniversary moment. So Wasafiri as well was founded in 1984 by Dr. Sushila Nasta at a moment where, there was a real kind of like dearth of spaces for writers of color to be published, to be promoted, to be championed. So it started off as a magazine for Black and Asian writing in particular. So lots of the kind of big prize-winning writers, the Booker Prize-winning and Nobel Prize-winning writers we see today, first started off at Wasafiri, and their work was reviewed at Wasafiri when it was not reviewed anywhere else. So I've been at the magazine for over 5 years now, kind of through various vantage points as well, have been able to kind of observe the kind of growth of the magazine from the 35th anniversary to what is now our 40th anniversary year. So I started off as an intern. I went on to do a digital role, doing kind of digital editing and commissioning and social media. And then in 2022, this was alongside my PhD. And then in 2022, after I submitted my PhD, I returned to the magazine as deputy and reviews editor. And then as of this year, I'm now the editor and publishing director. So in between this, I was also doing a little bit of part-time work at Tilted Access Press, who are an amazing small press, publishing translations from various Asian languages, and doing a bit of outreach work at Poetry Birmingham Literary Journal, which is a tiny journal run by one woman in Birmingham, doing some incredible work. You should absolutely check them out. So yeah, it's it's been a journey mostly at Wasafiri with lots of little things on the side. I think Wasafiri has been really perfect for me as a space because I've identified that I really enjoy having one foot in the publishing industry and one foot in the academic world, which is what Wasafiri provides. In terms of my day-to-day, again, yeah, manage lots of people, editorial strategy, programming events. We're a tiny team as well, like, again, 5 people who all work part-time. So it's just about finding that right balance between the day-to-day and then thinking to the near future and then the far future, where we're funded by Arts Council England, we're based at Queen Mary University, and really just thinking about moment around precarity in the arts, and thinking through how we can kind of survive for the next 40 years. So that is something that preoccupies me on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, I'll come back to a few more things later, maybe. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's really great hearing all the training experiences you've gained with bigger and smaller companies. It sounds really great. If I could go to Elliot now, could you share with us your journey to the story behind the founding of BookSlam? What initially inspired you to create a platform that bridges literature and popular culture, and also what your day-to-day looks like?
Sure. I've got to give a shout out to Ben Watt. He's the musician in Everything But the Girl. So basically back in 2004, he used to run a venue called Cherry Jam. And he asked my friend Patrick, who's this brilliant author, to run a night for him at his club and to call it BookSlam. So that had been running for a few months, and I went down probably late 2004. So it started, so this is 20 years ago now. So it started, it was a tiny venue, probably held about 80 people. But there was just, when you walked in and you could see sort of the energy of the authors and the poets and the music acts all together under one roof, I'd never seen that before. And it sort of sparked something in me that I wanted to get involved with and try and grow and continue. So, I mean, I was working with Patrick. I just commissioned him to write a play that was touring at the time. So we joined forces, and then started working together in 2005. So I wrote an Arts Council application, and I think received about 20 grand. We changed the venue from Cherry Jam to the old Subterranean in West London under the Westway, and just sort of got bigger and better. And for me, it was, at the time, 2004, 2005, there was nothing for people like me. There was no sort of book events for people like me and my friends. They were all sort of really dry, like cheese and wine pies, and very exclusive, restrictive sort of book events that weren't cool at all. And we wanted to sort of break that mold and make it way more accessible and mix really cool music with amazing authors and spoken word poets and comedians and magicians, and sort of blow up the whole premise of what a book event was and could be, and turn it into something new and exciting and something that my friends and I would want to go to. And it sounds like people on this panel have had very similar journeys. They're not being supported. There's nothing for them, so that you have to create it yourself. And I think that's what we did at BookSlam. And it's been running for 20 years. It's super exciting. I still love working on it. I love reading. I love working with poets. I love working with musicians and comedians. And it's about sort of shaping exciting and different and interesting formats in a live space.
Thank you for sharing your cooperation with others and sort of making more accepting spaces. If I go to Leah now, can you share with us the journey that led you to become a spoken word poet, workshop facilitator and speaker, and what initially drew you to these forms of expression and inspired your latest campaign address?
Thanks, Ariana. Well, I've got about 35 years to put into 4 minutes or something. So let me think. I would say I came to it really by accident. I was working for the Inner London Education Authority as an advisor on work with girls and young women. And Margaret Thatcher disbanded the Inner London Education Authority. So I lost my career and I didn't know what to do. And Apples and Snakes, the performance poetry organization, had just started. And I went to something that they did in Soho. And I saw Liz Lockhead do her thing. And I just thought, I want to do that. I really want to do that. So I used my redundancy money. I went on writing courses and I went on a performing course. And I just think I'm so lucky because everything I've done in the last 35 years builds on what I love and what I'm passionate about, the politics that I'm passionate about. And so soon after I started writing stuff about myself, really, I got taken up by survivors poetry, which was for people who come through the mental health system. And they started to use me because I, knew about informal education and community engagement. And so they started asking me to do workshops in psychiatric hospitals, which was amazing for me to see how the writing and performing that had been so powerful for me, for my own well-being, but also for my ability to express myself, how I could impart that to others. And, people at the hardest places, just to be able to listen to them and to encourage them to write and to perform. And then soon after that, the Anne Frank Trust asked me if I would do work in their prison project. And my mum was a Holocaust survivor. So it felt amazing to take Anne Frank's story into prisons and to help people write about their own experience of the lineage of genocide, maybe, but also how dehumanization had worked in their life. And I think that that's what really cemented things once and for all for me, to see people in incarceration in the hardest places where you lose all self-determination, all sense of who you are, that writing and performance was a space that they could claim and come back to themselves, come back to who they were. And I did that for about 20 years up until COVID, and it's got really tight now to get back into prison. So, and then the other thing is I've been really lucky. I got 2 Leave a Hume Trust residencies. The latest one was to work, I'm in Kent, and I worked at the 2 universities in Canterbury on the theme of age and aging. And it gave me the opportunity to make a film about me and my dad and the impact of dementia on our relationship, using poetry and different film techniques, and to start Older Women Rock, which was my plea for visibility of older women and looking at sexism and ageism and racism and poverty and all the issues that come together. And then to come up to date, I wanted to do something about climate crisis, and I'm really into fashion, and it just seemed a really good way of putting things together to work on fast fashion and climate justice. And I'm always looking to see how I can get poetry out in a different way. So working with filmmakers and making films is a way that you get a much wider audience and you can reach people, but also putting poetry onto clothes and then having an intergenerational and racially diverse group of women and girls go on the streets and wear the clothes that have poetry on is a really great way of engaging the community on issues that are really hard. So yeah, that's the 35 years in a nutshell.
Thank you. That sounds really amazing. And just hearing how powerful these forms of literature are for mental health and expression, it's really great. Going back to Aimée now, how do you approach the selection process for projects at Night Of to ensure that they align with your mission and values?
Yeah, I would say like the 3 core fundamental words that we use to describe our ethos are creative, open, and authentic. And those aren't things that we have put anywhere in our office, or we don't wear t-shirts that say that, but they really are terms that we kind of use to inform the books that we're publishing. So when it comes to a story, I think that I mentioned earlier, the things that we're looking for are good, strong characters, but also fun. I think working in children's publishing, there is an element of fun that we get to engage with that you might not in adult publishing. And so we're always looking for fun stories, stories that take you on an adventure. I'm really character driven, but our editorial director has a taste which is more to do with world building. Came up the other day and I was like, I'm always looking for the character first, and even if the world is a mess, I'm like, it doesn't matter because I'm following that one person. And she's very much like, no, I can make the characters do what I want if the world is kind of set already. And so while she's editorial director, we run a pretty flat organization at KO, and that we really encourage everyone, even if it's in our design team or in our marketing team, that if there are voices and stories or even people that we think should be writing in children's spaces that are in adult spaces, we kind of have a monthly creative meeting where we all kind of just dump ideas or notice that certain stories aren't being told, and use that to inform our publishing program. We also have what's called open submissions at Nights Of, and so whilst we have relationships with all of the main agents in London, they're not always sending us the types of stories that we're looking for, and so we think it's really fundamental to have open doors when it comes to writing. A lot of people don't even know how the publishing process works, and so we have an open inbox whereby if you're a writer, you can send us the first 3 chapters and you will get a response. It's not always going to be a guaranteed, great, fantastic, we'd love to publish you. But we have had a few gems come through our inbox in that very way. One of our titles, High Rise Mystery by Shana Jackson, was found in that way. High Rise Mystery was the first detective duo series for children to feature 2 main young Black girls ever. And so sometimes you get those real gems in the inbox, and Shana went on to win the Waterstones and published in Italy and like so many other territories. And so I always say that the inbox, there's always a hidden gem in there somewhere. And then when it comes to our illustrators, we often try to pair up or find as close as possible a related background for our illustrators with the authors that they're working with. And so for A Kind of Spark, for example, our neurodivergent author was paired up with a neurodivergent illustrator, and they created something which I think is like superb and fantastic. But when it comes to who's working on the books, and we really try to ensure that it's as authentic as possible, and so that the voices that are being uplifted in the stories and the authors that are being uplifted are also being uplifted in other areas such as the illustration as well.
Thank you. It's really interesting hearing more about children's publishing and your work with uplifting voices. It's really great. Thank you. Go back to Sana. With your work appearing in prestigious publications such as The Guardian, Financial Times, and the Los Angeles Review of Books, how do you balance your editorial responsibilities at Wasafiri with your personal writing projects?
Thanks. Yeah, I have to admit, I have taken a slight step back on my personal writing projects with the new role now. But it's also a very difficult time to be pitching to newspapers and magazines. Review space is shrinking rapidly. And it's nice to also know that I can kind of fall back on Wasafiri and my work there, sort of on the other side of the publication process, to commission and to do the kind of diverse and inclusive coverage that I would like to see in national broadsheets or bigger magazines. So instead of kind of pitching more actively, I'm channeling some of that into my own editorial work, realizing that, I don't always have to be the writer of a piece that I've thought of, and I can commission someone else to bring my ideas to life. And that's the kind of approach I'm taking now. So I'm just step back on my own writing, focusing more on amplifying other voices, amplifying the kinds of stories that I really want to read, or reviewing books that I know may not get national coverage, interviewing writers and publishing the kinds of kind of creative critical writing that, you know, is considered too experimental or too obscure or whatever it's called, by larger organizations, and kind of who overlook that kind of writing, taking a lot of inspiration as well from the fantastic work being done in the UK, especially by independent small presses, who are really sort of taking it upon themselves to publish writing that, you know, gets rejected by the major presses, etc. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. That's really great to hear how you sort of integrated your writing interest into your other roles, and also your work to uplift voices. Thank you. Going to Elliot now, could you discuss the process of organising and hosting book slam events, from selecting venues to coordinating with featured artists and authors?
Sure. So Book Slam features storytelling in all its form. That's what we celebrate. So from prose to poetry, comedy and songwriting. And typically we invite big name authors to share the stage with underground talent. And it normally starts with bagging that big name author. That's what I normally do. So I speak to lots of publicists. I get the catalogues way in advance, because publishing, the whole process is so slow. I know who's being published in a year, you know, next year. So it's about getting those calls in early and trying to bag that big name author and making them appear at my event as part of their book tour, which is great, because then you get the support from the publisher in terms of travel, accommodation, fees, like even dinner, drinks. They bring them to the event, they look after them, they get them up on stage and sort of make it part of the evening, which is amazing. So we start with a big name author, we get their available dates, then we bag the venue, then I do a budget. Budget is super important, income versus expenditure. I try not to lose my shirt, because most of the time it's my money on the line. Then I confirm as many things as possible and build a program around the headliner. So sometimes I try and theme it as much as possible. I try and give it some sort of a theme so I can hook you on something. And I book the host. I always tend to go for a comedian, because they're really, really funny, and sort of they tie everything together and just lift the whole event. I normally book 1 or 2 poets, a musician or a band, normally solo to trios. But in the past, we've had magicians, we've had MCs, always try and book a DJ for the changeovers. The venue has to be perfect. Been to so many venues where the acoustics have been terrible, the stage isn't right, the lights are wrong, the sound system's dodgy, they've got no backline, there's no furniture. So the venue is super important. And in the past, we've been so lucky. I think when we do a book slam at a new venue, they're always sort of surprised at how amazing the audience is and how supportive everyone is. They always invite us back to do more. And generally we can cut deals. I can cut deals with venues so that the venue hire is pretty low, because it's a really, normally book crowds, I don't know why, but people love to drink wine. So venues love that. What else? Partnerships. That's very important as well. In the past, we've had support from the Arts Council, Gulbenkian Foundation, PRS Foundation, Paul Hamlin Foundation. And really, for live literature, to make ends meet, it's very hard to make money, to even break even sometimes. So you need to try and even bag a sponsor, or find or work with a funder who's going to sort of underwrite things. And in terms of sort of the process of the night, it's call sheets, getting the artists to the venue in time, sort of stage managing it all, making sure the musicians are sound checked, working with the sound engineer, working with the venue managers, working with security, briefing them. It's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. If you can imagine throwing your own birthday party, it's pretty much that. Just a few extra things like marketing and press and selling tickets and budgeting, and looking after the talent, making sure that they're having a good time. And the audience, the most important people are the audience, because if they're not having fun, they're never going to come back again. So you want to try and make it as inclusive and warm and welcoming as possible, and fun and creative and thought-provoking and and happy.
Thank you. That was really great hearing your process and all the different responsibilities involved since you produced so many successful events. To go to Leah now, your award-winning poetry films have been screened at various festivals internationally. Could you tell us about the creative process behind these films and also about whether you feel that there's a metropolitan bias at work in the literary world as a non-London-based creative?
Hey, I really love watching poetry on film, seeing how you can interpret it and how it can build on the words. So I made the first film about my experience as an English Jew, and I think it's just exciting to think about where you place your work as a writer and what kind of audience you're going for. So with each poetry film, I've worked with a filmmaker, although the last one I just made, I worked with an editor and I actually directed it myself, which was really exciting. But the thing I'd say about it is that it's, you know, as a poet, I'm used to just having a pen and a piece of paper. I still like writing on paper. When you get to film, the money is just unbelievable. I mean, not only to make the film, but to put it in for the bloody film festivals. You know, I spent 90 quid last week on submitting the latest film to 3 film festivals. And then if you're very lucky, I got about 2 grants from the British Council to go to a film festival when the film was actually shown. And that's really exciting because as an artist, often, you know, when you're working on film, you're putting your work out, you've got no idea how it's being received. And so it was just thrilling to go and see the film being shown on a really big screen and then hearing the audience and what they understood and what they didn't understand. Some of their interpretations were really weird. So it was just interesting to engage. And I tell you, probably the most exciting thing was during COVID, the Address project, you know, the Women, Fast Fashion and Climate Justice campaign, we decided to make a film and we made it on the harbour in Folkestone, where I live. It cost about £2,000 to make it, and it's now gone to about 20 different countries, to film festivals. And I just think it's wonderful that something that you can do with just a gang of women and girls, and then it can just have a life of its own. And it got into really interesting eco film festivals. Like there was one that went along a river on bikes. The whole crew went along on bikes and showed the films in libraries and community centres right through Eastern Europe. And I thought that was made in Folkestone. It was really, so that was great. The thing about metropolitan bias, I mean, I'm a Londoner. I'm part of a huge gang of artists who've moved down to the southeast coast. You know, Margate and Folkestone and Ramsgate is just full of artists now. So maybe I'm being a bit naive, but I feel like there's pots of money that are aimed at places outside of London, and I've certainly benefited from that. And recently I had a residency in Newcastle, and I mean, the work that's being done outside of London is something else, and maybe it doesn't get quite the same recognition, but there's thrilling work going on around the country. And I feel really privileged, you know, when I get the opportunity to go and see what other artists are doing and work with them. Anything else to say about the films? I'll give a little plug to the films. If anyone's interested in seeing any of the poetry films, not the latest one, because that's being put into film festivals, so that can't go out yet. But they're all on my website, which is leahthorn.com. There's a page of films, and some of them are much stronger than others. Some of them you can see are made on an absolute shoestring. But yeah, I'm really proud of them. I don't have children, but I feel like they're my legacy.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really great to hear about the process behind sort of filmmaking and funding. And it must be really interesting engaging with the audience of the films. Going to Sana, your academic background includes a PhD in literary prizes. How has this influenced your perspective on literature and your work at Wasafiri?
Yeah, I would say that I don't know if there's any direct kind of connections. I've been thinking about this question a little bit. And I Wasafiri run their own prizes. So we have two prizes. One is the New Writing Prize for fiction, life writing, and poetry. It's the 15th year of the prize this year. It's for previously unpublished writers. It's open at the moment for entries. We also have a relatively new essay prize for PhD candidates and early career researchers, which is also open at the moment. And I think just my research around literary prizes, which was to do with the 50th anniversary of the Booker Prize and the 20th anniversary of the Cain Prize for African writing, and looking at the politics and ethics of literary prizes. And my kind of main takeaway from that was that prizes are not only good or only bad, they're both. And trying to find kind of more transparent ways to run a prize, especially for writers who've never been published before, but also addressing the fact that, you know, any kind of eligibility for a prize necessarily excludes someone else. So we're just trying to think about, you know, how to make a prize that's open for writers from all across the world, a prize that's kind of, you know, really career starting in lots of ways for writers who then go on to get book deals and publish full length poetry collections or essay collections, etc. So just trying to think about how to run a prize like that. I think I would say that's been the kind of biggest connection between the two. But I think it's also helped in developing sort of key areas of growth for a larger kind of editorial strategy, and, you know, our academic submissions and our peer review systems, etc., and what kind of stories we want to nurture and support, what kind of stories aren't being told, what kind of stories the industry considers prize-worthy, or, you know, worthy of publication, etc. And I think, you know, a big moment as well for Wasafiri, or two big moments actually in the last 5 years, I would say, were when Bernardine Evaristo won the Booker Prize, shared Booker Prize, I should add, and Abdul Razak Gurnah won the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago. And, you know, those two writers really started off at Wasafiri, have been such an important part of Wasafiri's archives and history. And it's only now, all these years later, that they're being recognized in such a way. So thinking about, I guess, other small prizes that do really vital work. The Republic of Consciousness Prize, which is for small presses in the UK, or prizes specifically for translations, and what kind of sort of support they offer at kind of very early stages of a writer's career. And I think, yeah, I think that's, and I have also, like, in the past few years, judged a few prizes. So coming at it from that perspective has been really interesting as well. Kind of just, you know, takes away that smoke screen a little bit. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for sharing sort of the prizes available for submission and sort of the growth that you've sort of seen before your eyes. It's all really amazing. Going to Aimée, what advice would you give to sort of aspiring publishers who are also passionate about amplifying underrepresented voices in literature?
I think first and foremost, I would say to anyone that's looking to either get into publishing or launch an indie press, is to find your community and have people around you. If you're looking to launch an indie and you're doing it on your own, that's okay. But I cannot stress the importance of having people who not only believe in the ethos of what you're doing, but also just believe in how necessary it is, who see viability in it, who see commercial viability in it. Because there will be along the journey, especially if you're working in championing underrepresented voices and inclusive children's books, there will be moments of isolation. And I think we still exist in an industry that is largely white, that is largely middle class, that has, in my opinion, reverted back to some of its previous ways in terms of the books that I'm even seeing getting retail space. And I think those moments can feel very isolating. You can feel very tired. And I don't underestimate the amount of work it takes on you physically to be championing voices that you know should be existing and having the same. I heard you talking just now, Sana, about review space, and I'm just like, children's books get like this much review space, and the top 10 is often dominated by celebrity authors. So my advice is, first and foremost, to have people around you, to always have people who have a knowledge and a skill set around you as well that is not your own. I think I know the things that I'm good at really well, and I'm fortunate enough to know people who have a skill set for things that I don't know really well, and being able to have and build, if not a team in-house, but to build like a network of people whose experiences go beyond yours is really important. Other advice, I think also just maintaining or being able to hold on to the joy of what you're doing is as equally important as well. I speak about joy a lot as something that is actually really quite active, and something that is not only like a personal thing, but a thing to be shared as well. Working in children's books, I believe, is a privilege. Getting to go and see like the children whose books that I'm publishing, you know, see their faces, see their reactions, and give them the experiences that I wish that I had had as a kid who was absolutely obsessed with reading, but didn't even recognise that I should have been in the pages or even on the cover as an author. Being able to make that like standard for children, that they have that expectation, is also really, really incredible. And so being able to hold on to the center for me, which is the kids. As corny as that sounds, I often am telling my team that the kids are our future, and they're looking at me like, there's that line again. But like truly holding on to that, I think, is also another piece of advice I would give. And then reaching out, I think so much of publishing is like a mystery, and you know, whether it be the contracts that we're signing with our authors, or whether it be the sales and how that whole system works, like so much of it is a mystery. And so feeling as though you can ask questions, I think, is also some advice that I would give. I was really fortunate that when we first launched KO, a lot of the heavyweight champs of like indie publishing reached out to me and kind of pulled me to one side and said, if you need anything, you can just ask. And I think so often we're like, gosh, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe we'll turn to the internet and think that the answer's there, but how much easier it is to be able to talk to an individual who has that experience. And I think where possible, even if you don't have personal connections, an email just to ask is something that I would always advise as well. So very simple again, but like if you don't know the answers to things, always just ask, because as big as this industry is, it's made up, I'm a huge champion of indie publishing, but it is made up of some like really tiny indie publishers who have been here for much longer than I have, for example. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really great hearing sort of the great and the difficult aspects of publishing. I'll hand off to Edmund now for the audience Q&A.
Thank you so much, Ariana. That was fascinating. We do have some questions from the audience. A reminder that if you'd like to ask a question, you can just type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. First of all, somebody asks, and I suppose this question is mainly for Aimée and perhaps for Sana as well, would you recommend undertaking a publishing master's for someone who's completely new to publishing and wants to get into the industry, Aimée?
I would not. Maybe controversially, my career progression, I think, is a journey that is unexpected. And so I did a year of interning at a time when interns weren't paid. And then I had an entry-level job as editorial assistant, and was then made editor, and then left the industry and launched Nights Of. So I can't self-proclaim that doing a publishing master's is necessary. I have learned a lot on my feet, and I'm not entirely sure now I mean, I don't know what the difference would have been if I had done a publishing master's as to what I'm doing now. I think the sooner you can get in the door of a publishing house, be it small, be it large, that is where you're going to really start picking up that day-to-day knowledge, and that things will just start to kind of mesh together in a way that I'm not sure publishing would do. But you know, education is important.
Thank you very much. Sana, do you have any thoughts on that, on the value of publishing master?
Only to agree with Aimée on that front. So I did my master's in post-colonial studies, but I would say again that the kind of experience that I got, doing the placement at Wasafiri really sort of, made me realize that what it is I'm interested in doing, or what it is I enjoy doing. So I think something that's really important as well when thinking about getting into publishing or into the larger industry is to identify what interests you. So whether that's editing, publishing, marketing, being an agent, hosting events, reviewing books. I think there's a lot of different ways, sometimes overlapping ways of making an impact. And I don't think there's any straightforward story to success. I think, some parts are slightly more linear than others, but again, I can't speak, I didn't do that. I didn't do a master's in publishing, so I can't really speak to, how my trajectory would have been different in that sense. But I don't think it's a necessity is what I would say. I think experience, identifying, doing lots of different things at the beginning to really see what you enjoy doing and what sticks with you the most, or what feels meaningful in terms of kind of building a career out of it is a lot more important. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a related question which has been asked in a couple of different ways by a couple of people, but I'll just come back to Sana and Aimée before opening things up to Elliot and Leah, but about what publishers and editors are really looking for on people's CVs when making appointments. What kind of qualities? Evidently not masters in closely related areas, but what?
For me, so I think sometimes it's really obvious when someone is making stuff up on a CV or on a covering letter. I work in children's books, and it is absolutely fundamental that you have a passion for children's books. And that is easily identifiable as something that you don't have in a covering letter where you're just talking very broadly about things. I cannot underestimate how far passion goes. And there have been people that I have hired over people who have maybe the technical experience, but when you bring them in the room, it's very clear that they have a basic idea of publishing and like the different departments, for example, but their passion for books, their passion for reading, it's non-existent. And I think I would much rather have a candidate who has that primary passion, especially at the entry-level position where I have zero expectation when it comes to experience. I would rather have someone who has a genuine passion for children's books, for the work that we're doing, for the ethos of the company, over someone that knows the industry in a very broad sense. And I think at the entry level roles, you're learning everything. And like Sana was saying, everything is on the table for you at that point. Like whichever department you want to go into, it's up to you. And I would also really recommend that people don't have a fixed idea of what it is they want to get into straight away, because outside of things like design, where you might need the ability to use the programs that design use, but outside of that, I think being really open to learning new areas of publishing is really fundamental. But passion, and I know that isn't a quantifiable skill, but it is something that is very evident in a room when you're against a candidate that doesn't have any.
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely. I think there's a huge difference between the perfect candidate on paper or in a CV, and then it's very obvious when you come across a candidate whose values really align with yours, who, like we like to say, like, who get Wasafiri, and I think it's important to identify as well for the person applying, who they want to work with, what kind of organization, and making sure that, the values of that organization or the kind of inclusive work they do, or what kind of work they're committed to, what their mission statement is, aligns with yours as well. So that I think goes both ways in terms of identifying who it is you want to work with. But yeah, absolutely. I would say that especially for entry-level roles, for placements, etc., like I don't think we think about something like experience as a prerequisite for that, because how can you have that? I think it's more important to understand. I think to have a little bit of a sense of like direction for the kind of work that you want to do at that particular organization, or how that organization can be helpful in kind of shaping your career, or like helping you identify the kind of career you want. But then also, yeah, absolutely, passion, aligned vision, the kind of mission statement aligning. I think we really think about those things, which seem less obvious, which you can't always relay on paper, in a cover letter, on a CV, which an MA in publishing may not offer you in a kind of straightforward way. But I think it comes from that connection that you can only have when a candidate has truly read the magazine, or has a personal connection with the magazine, or in terms of coming across a magazine, a particular piece that they identified with, that really helped them love reading, etc., or has looked at the masthead of an organization and identifies with the kind of people who are working there and wants to be a part of that sort of bigger picture. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's a couple of questions here which might appear very different, but I'm going to try and yoke them together and see what happens. The first is, what is the most challenging aspect for anyone who has an educational or casual interest in literature moving to become a professional? And Leah, I'd like to ask you that alongside. Someone else has asked, what are the best steps to take to find an agent for your work? And I wondered your thoughts on that. Sort of, is that one of the difficulties in moving into being a professional? Is it essential to have an agent? Does it matter, etc.?
I think I've never thought of having an agent. I mean, my work is so much about community engagement and raising issues and enabling others to be able to write and to publish in different ways. I mean, I'm interested. I think publishing by film is really interesting, and publishing, by having events. I mean, the book slam, I think, is a great way, clearly, of just getting the work out there. So I think it does depend a lot. That there's still a lot of value given to paper and the actual book, but not everyone's going to publish in that way. And I found it useful to have an organization behind me. Like when I first started, and I had Apples and Snakes behind me, and then I worked with the Anne Frank Trust. Often as an individual artist, it's hard to get into places. So aligning myself with them, or when I got the Leverhulme Trust residencies, one was with a museum, the other one was with the 2 universities. And it does open doors, I have to say. But I'm probably not the person to talk to about agents, because I'm not doing that kind of publishing. I'm making my own audiences and bringing people together so they can share their voices. It's not just my voice that interests me. That's the best I can do with that one.
Thank you. Elliot, if I could ask you, what's the most challenging aspects of turning a casual interest in literature to a professional interest? You said earlier that your work at Book Slam is very much like throwing a birthday party for yourself. What's the difference between just throwing yourself a birthday party and doing it for a living on a basis?
I mean, it's very difficult to make money in live literature. It's like all the poets that I know, they are not full-time poets, and even the authors that I know, they can't just. It's very few of them earn enough money to just sit and write books. They teach at Arvin, or they hold works. They do lots of different things. They write for TV, they write scripts, they're developing ideas. They've got their fingers in lots of different pies. And I think in order to survive in this industry, you have to be quite flexible and you have to diversify. You have to have your finger in a few different pies. And I think that's the best advice that I can give.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pick up on that specifically because somebody has asked how financially feasible is a career in literature? And all of you touched on this, the precariousness of the financial part of things in one way or another. Aimée and Sana, you both said in your initial answers that you spend a lot of time thinking about the sustainability of the presses, magazines that you run. And I suppose, how financially feasible is a career in literature? And also, you know, how optimistic are you all about the future of your particular field, of that financial model? If we could start with Sana, please.
I won't lie, at the moment, the way it stands with the Arts Council and massive funding cuts, the future looks pretty bleak for small organizations who rely so heavily on this kind of public funding. We are constantly thinking of ways in which, I think Aimée mentioned this earlier about, not doing the work on your own, but talking to each other. I think for small organizations, small presses, small magazines, we always find that we're in this kind of like echo chamber, right? Like we're all going through the same problems. We all don't have money. We all have massive dreams. How do we make it work? And I feel like, forming a collective, talking to each other, really sort of bringing the so-called marginalized voices and perspectives into the fold of the mainstream in order to apply pressure on this apparent mainstream, this apparent center, and to kind of let the work speak for itself in a way to say, where exists, we're writing, you have to take us seriously, like you have to critique our work, you have to give it prizes, and continuing to just do that work, I think, is what makes this feel slightly more sustainable than it may, be on paper. It's a difficult moment, I think, and I'll also pick up on this related question I saw in the chat, which is around diversity, and the kind of combination of the lack of diversity within publishing, and then where the bulk of the money is. And we had this incredible report by Dr. Anamik Saha on diversity in publishing, say 5 years ago now. What changes are we really seeing? What organizations are, in the past year, couple of years, the number of small magazines that have gone on hiatus, that have shut down, the number of small presses who are no longer able to sustain their kind of publishing models. I think those are all realities within publishing that we have to take very seriously. I think we have to think of alternative models of funding, of publishing, of supporting new organizations. I don't know if this completely answers your question, but it's a difficult time for the arts. It's a difficult time for literature, but it's also incredibly rewarding work. It's exciting. It's, I don't want to put you off this incredible thing that we try to do every day. Supporting writers, nurturing writers, spending 6 months with a piece, I don't know how long with a book, seeing it come to life, promoting it, seeing it win prizes, seeing writers get recognition, seeing the first translation from an Indian language to ever win the Booker Prize. Like that kind of work is exciting and rewarding and important, and we have to keep doing it despite the challenges, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with Sana as well. It is, like, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that it is a really difficult time, particularly for the type of work that we're doing. I mentioned earlier retail space and retail support, and how sometimes you feel as though you're constantly fighting. And so a career in literature at the moment, I think is, however, still viable, because there are organizations that are holding on. There are organizations that have a future approach, that have a future outlook. And I think, yes, we're in this moment for now, but we all have aspirations and hopes to exist beyond it. And I think the last thing on anyone's minds is, although it is a real threat to a lot of organizations, is closure. And I think we're not thinking, okay, how do we wrap this up? We're thinking, how do we survive it and get through it, grow it, expand it? How do we realign that center that Sana was talking about? How do we ensure that the voices that we're publishing now are still here beyond, I know for me, beyond my own existence? And so you will often find that drive and that skill that we have in-house, and even though it's difficult times, like, it can create really creative and beautiful ways to get through something. And so whether it is partnering up, I saw in the bookseller, I think it was the last week or the last few weeks, how two small indies have now joined forces and are working together. And I think that will probably be something that they had never thought of before, and now their togetherness will probably open and expand new markets for them. And I think we exist for now, but we also exist for the future, and I think that is something that we want to maintain. And so a career is still an option, and literature is still an exciting and fun place to be, despite the landscape. And also, I think the landscape also just shows that the work that we're doing is needed and necessary, and that the voices that we're pushing, promoting, celebrating should be and can be an antidote to what we're seeing in the world.
Thank you very much. Leah, you mentioned Leverhulme grants and British Council grants, and also I think you said pots of money available to people who are based outside London. Do you feel confident about the sort of continuation of such streams of funding?
I think I'd be silly to feel confident about it. I spend a lot of my time trying to find pots of money just to, do bits of work. And so it also depends on the content of what I'm doing. So when I did Older Women Rock, there was very little interest in putting any money towards that. But something like the fast fashion and climate justice, there's more kind of willing to back it. But I'm talking really small pots of money. And sometimes, I just feel that I would rather sometimes just make do and try and not get funding, so that I don't have to start tick boxing and, contorting the work that I think needs to be done. So I am lucky that I can get money sometimes from doing workshops, and I have a state pension. I'm state pension age. So, but I really like to pay the other artists that I work with. And of course it costs money to make these clothes and to do the workshops in schools and whatever. So there is money out there. We're all fighting over the same small pot. Some of the bigger charities, grant giving bodies, have realized that they need to give money to grassroots organizations who can't attract the big charity funding. And so it's really worthwhile just looking out and seeing what there is. And the other thing that was really helpful for me is that I got a Winston Churchill Travel Fellowship. I got to go across the States, going into women's prisons with theatre companies and other writers. So there's ways out there, I think but it takes a lot of time and energy to find a good fit and get the funding.
Thank you. Yes, there was a comment which seems to have disappeared from the chat asking about how the literary world is different from how it was in the 19th century. And I think the disappearance of patrons is a thing that we can all regret. Leah, there's another question directly for you about your experience working in psychiatric hospitals, which the questioner says sounds so rewarding and something I'd be really interested in myself. Where can I find positions like this? Is there any relative experience I should gain before applying?
Yeah, so I think London Arts and Wellbeing is a really great hub to look at. There's lots being offered. Well, that's London based, but you can also do things online. And I think just if you can get to sort of be an apprentice with someone, I'm always being asked, if people can come and see just sit in on a workshop. Sometimes that's not possible. It certainly wasn't in prisons. But just to see, you know, who's around. Survivors Poetry doesn't exist in that same way, but there are organisations that are going into these institutions and doing really good work. And again, it's a question of researching where you are and who's around.
Thank you very much. We've got time for just one or two more questions. There's one here. What are the stories that each of you are most interested in, and what kinds of stories do you felt that you've heard too little about? Elliot, if I could start with you with that question.
The stories that I'm interested in hearing. That's a very good question. I mean, for me, I think I want to hear stories from voices like my own. I just want to hear stories that are really diverse and come from different backgrounds. And I think the thing that excites me is the sort of mixed disciplines. So it's the way that we tell those stories. So like, for instance, a few years ago, I did an event with these MCs, these grime MCs primarily, like Dave and it's like Ocean Wisdom, Footsie, and you know, they were just really incredible. DWE, they were incredible MCs in their own right. But I asked them to do an event that was a cappella, and so no music. It was all spoken word, and their performances were so powerful and moving. They were telling the stories. It was sort of incredible to witness. And I think I just love sort of tweaking things and changing things slightly to ask people to do things that are slightly different outside their comfort zone, just to see what happens. I love that.
Thank you very much. Sana, do you have thoughts about the kinds of stories that you're particularly interested in? I mean, I suppose you must do commissioning work and publishing work in a magazine, and the kind of stories that you feel you've heard too little about.
Yeah. I think one is in I'm really interested in stories in translation. I'm interested in you know, we've been talking about this boom in translation in the UK for the past few years, but just really thinking through which languages, so particularly European languages and translation into English, kind of really making it to the bigger markets. So thinking about the hierarchy within all of those languages that are celebrated. But so I would say within that, looking at writing in particular from across Asia and across Africa, writing that is surprising, a story that's surprising, a story that is there to kind of shatter stereotypes around what a story should look like, or a story from a particular background or a particular kind of voice or perspective should look like. I think I'm most interested in that, a story that can kind of just really hold its own in that sense against a kind of a narrative that has become a bit more, you know, acceptable, or like a kind of major dominant narrative. So something that comes in and kind of disrupts that a little bit is what I'm really interested in.
Thank you very much. Leah, do you have thoughts on the kinds of stories that you'd like to hear more of?
Yeah, I mean, this is very specific, but we've been trying to think about how to reach women who do buy fast fashion and who would never come to something that was seen as, you know, a feminist event or a climate justice event. And it's about finding what stories they want to tell, rather than assuming, you know, that you can put their narrative on them. And so one of the things we've come up with is talking to women about tattoos, just going up to women in the street and asking them to tell us their story of their tattoos. And then we're going to work with these women to put them onto clothing that we can again take out. But it's a way of finding a way in, say, into a woman's life, how you can actually listen to her, and finding finding something that's going to be accessible. So rather than talking to her about, you know, how she buys clothes and what her decisions are about going to a fast fashion outlet, to actually talk to her about how she adorns her body with tattoos. And the stories that are coming out are phenomenal, you know, stories about when there's a death and the tattoo means something to the hair because of that, or having an operation, or, you know, just all these wonderful, rich stories about women's lives. But it's about creating an environment, I think, in which in this case, women have space to tell their own stories, unfettered by what I'm actually wanting them to say.
Thank you very much. And finally, Aimée, what sorts of, I guess, children's stories in particular are we?
Yeah. I think that there is still there can only be one in kids' books at the moment, and so I would just love more. And I know that sounds quite vague. I would love more authors not be competing for the same space. And I would just love more diversity within genre as well. I think fantasy is really booming at the moment. Dare I say romantasy is also booming, even in YA. But these spaces tend to look very homogenous. And so I would love that if something is popping off in a certain genre, that there's also like different voices within that as well. And on top of that, I think I would like to see a lot more intersectionality as well within the stories that are being told. And so I feel as though that is still like mind-blowing to some people, that yes, you can be deaf, but you could also be from a Black background as well. Like that, you know, it's still like, oh my God, no, one or the other. But yeah, I would love to see a lot more of that. And maybe something I'd like to see less of is celebrity as well. I will whisper that very quietly. But yeah, I think that they're just taking up space that, you know, debut authors fight so hard for. And so yeah, a little less of that and a little more of the other.
Thank you. A bonus answer there, the kind of stories we'd like to hear less of. That's a celebrity authored book to my 7-year-old son the other day, and it was so bad.
Well, that's because they didn't write it.
It was my
They
fault.
had a ghostwriter.
I could certainly listen to you all for hours more, but unfortunately, I think that is all that we've got time for. We do have some more questions, but I'm not sure we've got time for them. But maybe you'd like to have a look at the Q&A afterwards. Thank you so much. Hope you all join me in thanking Michaela Brunberg at the RSL and Ellie Parry-Davis at King's for organising this event. Huge thanks to Ariana for hosting the Q&A, and to our wonderful panelists. Thank you all so much. Thank you. And to the audience for your great questions. Thank you very much.